Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and attack helicopters. It's Jin'taan here, and welcome back to another episode of Jin'talks. This is another long episode, but hopefully it's going to go over stuff that's even more interesting than last time, as I'm going to be covering some of the theatres that I've really missed covering so far, and also the death of FCON, or at least the death of Phoenix Federation. So, as a necessary precursor to that, I want to take a look through the past 10 to 14 days of FCON and Phoenix Federation's life, and just show kind of what was happening and the context for their eventual failure cascade and evacuation. The first major sign for me was that minor strategic objectives started to fall to the hands of their opponents in this war. Larger strategic objectives were typically supported by Legacy and DRF, and made it impossible for Triumvirate to take them. However, smaller things, like for example, their foothold fortizar in Detroit, where Solar was doing much of the heavy lifting, was something FCON found themselves effectively unable to defend, meaning that they were losing some of the gains they'd previously made against Triumvirate in this war, which is almost always a bad sign for that side in the conflict. One point I do have to emphasize here is that Triumvirate felt that they had so little threat from FCON that they were willing to even deploy a Revenant to take down this single fortizar. The Revenant obviously being the Sanchez Nation faction supercarrier, and a ship I'm personally quite fond of as well. And this wasn't the only strategic loss. We also saw another Soitoyo go down, this time in the home region of FCON, Menace, where they were only able to muster a defense fleet of around 30 people to fight against Triumvirate's 120, which went exactly as you'd expect and ended up with a dead Soitoyo. And whilst Soitoyo deaths here aren't quite as critical as they are in the Northern Theatre, where the DRF is attempting to build up a large amount of dreadnoughts in order to counteract GOTG's capital strength in the area, it's still a blow to whoever put this down, in this case the Serenity Initiative, as they were likely using it on a member basis level to make money. And this attack on Phoenix Federation's ability to make money was something that was being slowly ramped up during the course of the war, as TRI began to develop and deploy dedicated Wolfpack-style strategies aimed at harassing PvE and impeding movement in their regions, although this did focus on Immensea as opposed to Tenerifis, meaning that some members of the coalition were able to make money just fine until the very end. Taking this tact in the war allowed TRI to focus on some of the smaller opportunities that the large coalition was presenting. For example, in this fight, Triumvirate was able to catch a large quantity of FCON jump freighters as they were attempting to evac from the area, and subsequently destroy what I assume is a large quantity of the assets that this person held. And these kind of incidents are incredibly detrimental to morale inside FCON, as not only do you see that someone was trying to evac their stuff from the region, you also see that they couldn't do it successfully and they died in the attempt. That sends a very, very bad message to the line member. And equally, it's probably a huge morale boost to Triumvirate just to see, this huge wall of kills on your kill board, and to show that your enemies are running away from you. And this kind of swing in morale momentum is really what kicked this whole cascade off, in my personal opinion. Not this one individual incident, of course, but the continued use of these kind of small victories for TRI, whilst large victories for FCON were almost assuredly just blue balls. As TRI typically wouldn't engage in these large final timers where FCON and their allies would all rally around and have 1,000 plus in local. And it's not like jump freighters were the only target that Triumvirate were able to take on. They were perfectly capable of targeting ratting supers, as you can see with this kill, and even Titans were not safe, with one getting a headshot right at the start of the war, in fact, in their staging system, reportedly off their staging keepstar. And TRI was able to get away with this due to low capital participation in Phoenix Federation that was giving TRI effectively capital supremacy without large amounts of warning for form-ups. And this is something that we can see very clearly in the leaked logs from the FC channels, which I'm presenting here with permission from Kugu Foreplay, which discusses the fact that during a recent form-up, not only was Phoenix Federation only able to bring 30 dreads to bear, an incredibly low number for a coalition of that size. All of those dreads came from Fidelis Constans, with absolutely none of them coming from other members of Phoenix Federation, leading to a large amount of infighting, finger-pointing, and of course defeatism. At this point we started to see the inevitable individuals evacing from their home region and just trying to make sure that their stuff was safe in case their home was invaded, as they felt it was no longer a given fact that FCON would be able to hold on to Immensea and Tenerifis in the long term. This led to some lower level leadership telling members not to evac, which, as we all know, is an incredibly bad sign for the health of both an alliance and a war in general. As if your alliance leadership is telling you not to evac, you probably should have evac'd a month ago. In order to stem the bleeding, FCON leadership then led a major State of the Alliance address in which they tried to talk to their member base and generally rally the troops for the continuation of this war. I've had mixed reports of the efficacy of this, with some saying that it really did work and it very much rallied the troops, and others saying that it was just catastrophic and killed morale. I don't really know who to believe, so if someone was present for that State of the Alliance or has a recording for me, your input on the topic would be greatly appreciated. However, just a few days after this address, NC Dot began to move capitals down to the south, further cementing Unnamed Coalition and their allies as the strongest non-legacy capital power in the south. This in general seems to have been a major decision point for the leadership of FCON, as after this point, they began to concentrate on surviving as a coalition and as an alliance, and made the call that there was no way that they could realistically contest for their home territories any longer with NC Dot in the area, leading to them evacing as an alliance to Poidon. Along with some, but interestingly not all, Phoenix Federation members. Some appear to have stayed behind in the area, either attempting to get agreements with Triumvirate following the war's conclusion, or intending to work with Red Menace Coalition, which is something we'll talk about later. Where FCON and the few remaining Phoenix Federation alliances which continue to follow FCON are headed following their retreat to Poidon is as of yet unclear. However, Peregrine Falls and Etherium Reach are the two most commonly floated possibilities. Still, the main impact that this retreat had on FCON and Phoenix Federation as a whole is that it began a massive splintering of the coalition, and even inside FCON, with vast numbers of both individual members and member corporations leaving the alliance for greener pastures. It is as of yet unknown whether or not FCON will even survive to see the transition to the deeper DRF territories, as the slope isn't showing any chance of slowing down right now. Still, this is just my second-hand point of view onto what's happened in the war between TRI and FCON over the past couple of weeks, and has led to these events. In order to get a better idea and understanding of what's happened and what it all means, I talked to the alliance executives of both Triumvirate and FCON, Garst and Tarkinus respectively, to get their point of view on what's happened. Obviously, that means that the information presented here may be biased, so bear that in mind as you listen. I will also note that Tarkinus was unable to respond to me in audio, as he is currently very busy, given the circumstances. As such, I will be reading out his responses to my questions. First question is, why is FCON moving to Etherium Reach in your opinion?
Yeah, so that originally came out that they were going to be moving to Etherium Reach. I don't think they are anymore. I think right after that, a day later, they came out with a post saying they're going to be moving into the Keepstar and Peregrine Falls, and basically joining the DRFB team as squatters in their SOV. Yeah, it's a perfect example of like the leadership issues FCON I think has been having, where within the same day, they completely changed their plan. And I don't know, I think they're moving because they're no longer viable as a standalone alliance. I mean, their political decisions have really isolated them. It's burned a lot of bridges, goons don't want them, we don't want them. So, I mean, basically the East is really the only place left that would actually take them. And, similar to how FCON accepted pretty much anybody with a pulse into PFED, XX accepts pretty much anyone with a pulse into their, Meat Shield DRFB team alliance. So that's probably why they're going over there.
Tarkinus. FCON is moving to Etherium Reach in order to carry on the war against Triumvirate with our allies in the DRF. What do you think was the cause for the significant loss of members and corporations that FCON has experienced?
It's all about the leadership. I mean, everything goes back to the leadership. A lot of people were just, assuming that all the Reddit posts crying about FCON's bad leadership towards the end of the war was like tryouts. I mean, as far as I know, it wasn't. I don't know the posters personally, but I say the majority of them were real because they just lined up with all the internal drama and poor leadership that we were seeing through our own spies, through the leaks that KB posted for everyone to see. It's really telling that it's more than just the amateurish approach to the war itself. Like, we weren't really expecting masterful strategies from them, but internally I was really surprised to find out that they really didn't enforce any standards or discipline within the coalition as a coalition. So I mean, every alliance was looking for advantages over each other, poaching corps, bat-mouthing people behind each other's backs, and the entire time during the war, FCON leadership basically lied and said everything was fine when they knew things were not going well. So, you're asking why would corps leave? I mean, why would they stay at this point? If it's so toxic and mismanaged, why would you want to do anything and stay with them? And I think the trigger for them leaving finally, because if you notice, almost no corps left the entire war until they basically evac to Podion, was that, a lot of their members, and especially CEOs and things like that, were content to just kind of be complacent and sit there. And until an outside force, in this case TRI and our allies, forced them to evac, basically, they really had no reason to change anything. And it's kind of just that complacency from bottom up and then, top down that I think just led to a real failed environment. And they are where they are today because of it.
Tarkinus. We lost our home in the south, and moving is a huge shock to an organisation. Groups that may want to try something new will use it as an opportunity to start over in order to keep their members. The players are what make up a group, not a name. And if people want to choose something different, it's a leader's responsibility to do what is best for their players. I've personally fault no one for going for a new path if it's the wish of their players. It's a game. Have fun. What was your overall approach to the war, and do you think it was the right one?
Well, I mean, we won, so I guess it was the right one in the end. We actually had a few different approaches. So we had a pretty experienced FC team. We fought a lot of wars and hopefully some more to come, but we still learned a lot. Our initial approach was counting on capital supremacy between CO2 and tri-cap fleets to grind through the major timers. We calculated that between our super cap fleets, we could take down these Fortizars, maybe even the Keep Star, stuff like that, and make our gains on the macro timers while still defending our own Sov. So we didn't attack FCON because we thought they were an easy target. We attacked them because they were the weak link of the DRF, noose around our neck, basically. We knew that they were going to pull in XX. We knew they were going to pull in Solar. We knew XX was going to hire God knows who against us, like they ended up doing. And basically the gamble was we needed to break FCON there and stay on the offense in the south while basically time zone tanking and also defending in the north. So we had the ability to engage in Euro time zone as TRI, but XX, despite a few alarm clocks, really can't get into US time zone very regularly. So we counted on that to basically defend our Sov for us in a sense. This is the current beta, so you might as well make use of it. And I wish it would change. I think our timing was pretty good since it hasn't yet. And basically that worked at first, but then obviously after CO2 got judged and fell apart overnight, that strategy was no longer viable. So the middle of the war, I say the war probably lasts about 3 or 4 months. The middle month or so, month or two, was really stalemated structure and Sov-wise. We couldn't actually get down these Fortizars for the most part. We were stuck just exploiting their mistakes, exploiting timers they didn't show for, and just really trying to grind down the morale in a war of attrition on FCON since we knew we were more suited for longer-term conflict than their member base was. But really at the end of the day, we were not getting down like their staging Fortizar or anything like that. We couldn't because a lot of people who weren't involved in the war probably don't realize it, but for a good 3 months, XX literally jump clone down every day. They called a CTA for every random iHub timer, and they would form a full Mac fleet, and they would sit on a Titan every single day in Euro time zone, and they would just AFK for hours, like the most Russian thing possible. They would just sit there and AFK on a Titan, while FCON would send out a few T1 caracals to run nodes, and it just straight up cockblocked us. So that was a real unfortunate turn of the war. But in the end, I think what finally won it for us, what finally broke them, was a combination of a couple of things. Um, just politically, overall, I mean, we broke their morale. We broke them through attrition. Alliances were leaving. Uh, Ultimately, CU Corps are now leaving, so they weren't going to convince the FCON strategy anyway. But two other things probably helped out a lot. One is that other groups eventually started to get involved more as well, specifically the GOTG war up north. It's very, very hard to sync Citadel timers and things with the way the time zone tanking is between the north and the south. So theoretically, you'd think that, hey, XX is fighting a two-front war. Realistically, when you actually get down to it, they're able to jump clone back and forth, so it really wasn't quite as decisive as we were hoping for. One sort told us that he was going to go invade up there for their own reasons. So what I can take credit for, though, is I think that what really was the straw that broke the camel's back was we divided TRI up into 4 groups of corps. We just basically called it our Wolfpack strategy. And each of those groups was assigned to a cluster of space to completely just lock down, harass, kill anything that undocked. We made them do some light and toasted harassment. They dropped their own citadels. They were doing cap drops, super cap hot drops, blobs, AFK cloaking, all that shit. And I mean, as soon as we rolled that out, less than 48 hours later, FCON evac'd. And I think the reason that was the final straw was, especially since their morale was already low from months and months of losing fights, is that because the typical FCON member and corp throughout the war, for the most part, was able to just kind of like ignore the major timers and just, chill in their saw like they always have in Rat and Mine, Tenerifis, or whatever, and just ignore the war because they knew XX would come save them on the bigger timers. And then as soon as we brought the war home to them into their own systems and stopped them from having any fun when they logged in, all of a sudden they didn't want to do it anymore.
So effectively, you attacked their member base as opposed to the Alliance.
Yeah, that was mostly a result of the fact that we couldn't go after the Alliance the way we wanted to. We couldn't kill the Sodios, we couldn't kill the Fortizars. They just had too many bat phones and these blobs that show up in the final timers. Just wasn't viable. So my only regret really of the war was not doing the Wolfpack idea earlier. But honestly, we didn't think we needed it at first. We thought it was going to be a little bit faster than it was. But I'm happy with it. We're going to keep the idea going forward for all future wars. Everyone loved it. We did some internal Wolfpack contests to see who could kill more, get the biggest kills, stuff like that. I mean, it paid off because October was our biggest month ever in the history of TRI. We had over 10,000 kills and 2 trillion is killed by a 1,700 man alliance. I mean, that was phenomenal for us. We all really had a lot of fun.
Tarkinus. Our approach to the war was that of survival. We kept our word to Solar Fleet in order to help defend Wing's Wanderers by declaring against CO2, even knowing that Triumvirate planned to attack us. We expected a two-front war, but hoped that the deal with the DRF would prevent TRI from going forwards with their plans. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. What do you think the future is for FCON and some of the other Phoenix Federation alliances?
I mean, I don't think they're going to die completely. I think the model you can look at is probably Razor. They have a lot of legacy members or half AFK members, whatever, that'll probably keep the name open. But all of the smart corps are bailing out, and the majority of them have. I mean, look at the slope. They've lost 2/3 of their member base in the last couple of weeks now that they've actually escaped to Podion. And I would assume that many of the remaining corps are going to bail as well. I wouldn't be surprised if people start memeing that they found FCON a few months from now, like they do with Razor.
Tarkinus did not directly answer this question, likely missing it amongst the other questions I posed to him. However, in our later conversation, he expressed a desire to keep FCON alive and within the DRF as a whole, in order to keep the unique culture of FCON alive in the game. What do you think the future is for TRI?
TRI will continue to grow. I mean, we have more corps than ever looking to join us. Leaving the DRF back in, I guess, July was probably the best decision we made in a long time because it basically made public the proof that we've been saying all along is that we were an independent entity. We were willing to take risks. We were focused on PvP. Being in the DRF, from an outside perspective, was a distraction from that, and it gave the wrong impression to people. So I'm really optimistic. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to continue growing. We're going to continue doing what we can, independently. We're going to continue focusing on Solar since they've been attacking us down here. So they're the next phase of our wars. We're going against Solar right now, and hopefully more people will see what we're doing and ask to join up and have fun with us.
Tarkinus. TRI burned every ally they had in their coalition in order to try and become a PL lookalike. Despite the fact that they have a very successful PR team working overtime on Reddit, their actions will be remembered if they survive this war. You don't screw over everyone who trusted you and have people trust you in the future. Do you think the war in the South will continue?
It'll continue for, some decent fights and third-party fights and stuff for fun. I don't think unless Test launches a major invasion of maybe like Menace or something that the campaigning is going to really be focused in the South anymore. I think the campaigning is all focusing east now, between GOTG in the north and TRI against Solar in our home regions now. So, Test is posturing to try and be the new power in the South. They're drawing closer to goons. There's been a few recent timers when significant goon presence, including Caps, has showed up to help against NC. and PanFam. And obviously there's some bad blood and some grudges there, but they obviously have, between Test and goons, a big dialogue open. So I think most likely they're going to have at least some kind of understanding, and Test is going to use that to consolidate in the South and continue meddling in what we're doing. Like even now, Progon and some other Test FCs are bringing fleets over for really no reason, just as a middle finger to Solar final timers and things like that. So they'll probably keep meddling, but for the most part, I think it's going to be going through a phase of consolidation in the South and Southeast right now, and the focus is going to be shifting to the East.
Tarkinus. I think the war in the South will shift focus, with Legacy Coalition being attacked by their old enemies in PL and NC, with TRI attempting to unseat Solar. What is left of the Phoenix Federation will be attacking TRI from the north, continuing to erode their home systems, with the rest of DRF backing them up. Quick carry-on question. What do you think is going to happen to FCON's old home regions?
That's actually already in progress, so we split that up for war spoils for our friends that were involved in the war, like Lumpine Fraternity, are taking Sov. The majority of it is being taken by Red Menace Coalition. So Red Menace was living down in period basis under goons protection, basically. But Test effectively got goons to say, hey, if Test invade you, we're not going to help against Test, basically, because you got involved in this war. So what that said to them, what that says when I interpret that, it means that goons don't really want them there anymore. And so they tried to get ahead of that, and they decided to leave and work with us instead as just a neutral neighbor and move into FCON space in Menace and Tenerifis. The interesting part about that is there's smaller groups left in the area that were formerly PFED that have kind of stuck around despite not having agreement with Red Menace or TRI or whatever. So it'll be very interesting to see, how hard Red decides to push them, or if that sucks Test into it, or what kind of casus belli people are going to invent for fighting each other here in the near future. So there's a lot of things up for grabs right now, which is why I say I think the South's going to go through a phase of consolidation. But while that's going on, TRI's going to keep fighting in the East.
Tarkinus. The remains of Stainwagon and Red Alliance appear to be looking at settling in there. Also, Phoenix Federation groups that flipped after the war was lost will probably be paying TRI rent for survival in the area. Alright, awesome. Thank you for agreeing to answer some of my questions. Any final comments or statements you'd might like to make about the war, politics in general, what's happened,
Yeah, no problem. I'm always happy to chat. I mean, I think overall, like I said earlier, the war has been good for TRI, but I think it's been better for EVE in general. Once again, we acted as a catalyst, and we kept pushing. I mean, don't get me wrong, the current SAW system is a lot of grinding, and there's a lot of tough moments and very frustrating moments. But we kept it going, and we pushed through that. And because of that, it went on long enough that a lot of other groups ultimately got involved in their own way, either as third parties or, quote-unquote allies or something like that, every way from PL, Horde, Red Menace, Test, even people like MC and stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of content that was created by this war for people who like to PvP and solve null. And I had fun. I hope everyone else is having fun. We're going to keep doing that in the future. When the servers die, all the ISK in your wallet doesn't really mean shit. It's the memories that you make while you're playing EVE that are really going to stick with people. So I'm glad we could be a small part of EVE's history, and I hope we'll be able to continue having some fun wars going forward.
Tarkinus. Just as commentary, Phoenix Federation was never designed to be a military powerhouse. We were a nursery for small alliances, or second chance alliances that wanted to make something of themselves that wouldn't have had a chance otherwise. We expected and openly discussed the fact that successful alliances would outgrow the coalition and go build their empires elsewhere. It's unfortunate that the coalition died, because there really isn't a place in EVE right now for any empire-building dreamers to get a start that doesn't involve renting. Moving on from the obviously impactful retreat of FCON, we have to notice that the theatre itself has not been static whilst FCON has been busy moving back, with the Red Menace coalition beginning to move independent of the Imperium and perform strategic operations in the south, potentially looking for a new home should they decide to splinter off from the Imperium, and fighting locals for control over various systems in protracted skirmishes. As both interviewees mentioned, they seem to be parlaying from previous skirmishes in Catch into a full-on attempt to settle into the space previously held by Phoenix Federation. The decision of the Red Menace coalition to participate in this may be linked inextricably with their previous decisions to aid Triumvirate and Pandemic Legion in attacking the Legacy coalition, due to their previous friendship with Steinmagen members who are currently still harassing Legacy in an attempt to take back their home in Catch. This obviously puts them at odds with the Imperium's general stance in the south, where they have been aiding Legacy Coalition due to the fact that they don't wish to see Pandemic Legion gain more power in the south. In future updates, we'll likely come back and take a look to see what space Red Menace Coalition has been able to capture and hold on to, and also to understand where Red Menace Coalition will eventually fit in to the political situation in the south that will develop after the conclusion of this war, assuming the DRF counterattacks do not completely wipe this area clean. Speaking of the DRF, it seems that their mercenary contracts are beginning to fall away, leaving them with significantly less allies. In fact, Skill Yourself has alleged that the DRF failed to pay them for their mercenary contract, and as such they have decided to turn on the eastern side of the DRF's territory, harassing renters in Etherium Reach. MC's contract has also concluded following the retreat of FCON, although my sources have told me that Mercenary Coalition has been paid for their work. Pandemic Horde was unable to be contacted for comment on this issue. Meanwhile, on the front lines in the Northern Theatre, a counterattack from the Drone Region Federation took place on Monday, which is, by my understanding, a Russian public holiday, allowing the DRF to take back Sov in all of Peregrine Falls. However, their attempt to remove the Guardians of the Galaxy staging Fortizar met in a bloodless failure, with the DRF claiming that their comms were DDoSed by the Guardians of the Galaxy, causing the form-up to fail and them to need to stand down. This is obviously disputed by the Guardians of the Galaxy, who claim simply that their form-up was bigger, numbering around 1,400 by some reports. MTO's TCU was later recovered, however the iHub, which as we've talked about before is by far the most important, remains under the control of the DRF. Later in the week, however, we saw Guardians of the Galaxy continue with their previous strategy of attacking Soitoyos and attempting to remove as much of the industrial infrastructure that the DRF has in the north as possible, with them killing yet another Soitoyo. This time using a large Cerberus fleet instead of the more typical super fleet that we've seen them utilize in the past for these sorts of operations. However, it should be noted that this Soitoyo was possibly anchoring, as it's unfit. However, I've been unable to talk to someone who is there, so I don't quite know. In general, however, with FCON being pulled back as a remnant into the existing DRF territories, and the front line in Peregrine Falls seemingly holding fast for now, it seems that the war might be changing pace, as the South itself may stop being a primary theatre, with people fighting over space FCON once held, and control over the allegiances of whatever factions take hold of that, taking priority in the minds of the Southern Alliances. Right now, the main question is what TRI is going to do forwards, as they have a great deal of options, from making a play for ex-Phoenix Federation territory, either directly or via pets, or by attacking Legacy who fought against them in this war, with the backup of PL and NC, alongside their existent allies in Fraternity and Lumpy, who have been instrumental in helping them so far in this war. Meanwhile, FCON's retreat and potential collapse may pour more heat onto what has up until now been a secondary theatre in this virtually all-consuming war, that of the Middle East of Etherium Reach and Great Wildlands, where the old Great Wildlands Coalition has made a move on the distracted DRF, taking a bite out of the 1VN TAC XC constellation, whilst working on H7Q TAC DG alongside the now disaffected Skill Yourself. The anti-DRF forces in this area include the Great Wildlands Coalition, which consists of the Unspoken Alliance, Nelseknaya Shalopen, Rot Capelle, Hashashin, Cartel, Op Elite, and the newly added Feign Disorder. Volta have also seemingly been willing to work with these anti-DRF forces, however their presence in fights has been dependent on wormhole connections to the area. Skill Yourself are neutral to this greater anti-DRF coalition, however they are working towards the same aims, and have been taking territory unopposed by the Greater Wildlands Coalition, and as such I'd place them on vaguely the same side here. Theoretically, the defending forces of Etherium Reach include the entirety of the Drone Region Federation and all of their allies. However, this has in practical terms not been the case, just due to pressure in other areas of their territory. And as such, the most common defenders of the area are Prothean Alliance, IRC, and the Army of New Eden. The most recent major fight in this theatre took place in RK TAC Q51 as a result of an Astra Shield timer, where the Greater Wildlands Coalition baited the DRF into committing capitals to a grid, followed by bringing Volta into the action and quickly dispatching them. Of special note for me personally here in this fight was the Prothean Alliance's use of 100 MN Tengus as their main line defending doctrine, which seemed to be ineffective at killing massed Cerberuses, whilst massed Cerberuses proved fully capable of killing them themselves. This led to the loss of 39 billion ISK in assets for the DRF, whilst the anti-DRF forces only lost around 8 billion. In general, up until recently this theatre had slowed down, as the DCU and Prothean Alliance had been needed in the north to deal with the Guardians of the Galaxy threat. However, with new blood soon to arrive, assuming FCON doesn't entirely collapse before reaching Etherium Reach, we could start to see a third full-on front in this war develop here, as Solar seems intent on continuing the DRF versus unnamed coalition conflict. Though there are rumours that Solar is ceding territory here, but that is as of yet unsubstantiated. This new front will likely be focused primarily on ceasing the moving in and continuing to run the small-scale skirmish and Entosis fleets that FCON has proven to be weak against in the past, which is a potentially troubling environment for an alliance in such a weak position to be putting themselves into. It also doesn't seem that the fall of FCON has been able to pull Legacy out of this war to any great degree, as we're still seeing conflict between them and Pandemic Legion and Northern Coalition, with the most recent example being a decisive loss for Test, with 95 Nightmares going down to a failed drop against NC Dot's Loki fleet, with Pandemic Legion turning up in a small Ferox fleet in order to support, leading to Legacy losing 65 billion whilst only killing 10 billion ISK of PanFam assets. Still, that about wraps up all of the major events up until now. I'm glad to have finally caught up after Amsterdam, and because I didn't mention it last episode, thank you to all the people who actually came up to me and wanted to talk about the videos. I find that really amazing. And also a shout out to Gungir, who has decided to translate my videos into Chinese and put them up in a Chinese video sharing service so that the Chinese community can kind of understand what's going on. I know I personally am always fascinated when I hear about what's gone on in Serenity, so I imagine much the same applies to them. Thank you all for watching, and as always, fly smart.